Number 8. Omari Garland. In a disturbing act of violence that was captured by a doorbell camera in July of 2022, a suspect was accused of assaulting and robbing a 70-year-old Asian American man as he arrived at his home in Fairfield, California. Identified by police as 30-year-old Omari Garland, the masked thief could be seen rushing up to the victim and ordering him to hand over his belongings at gunpoint. The senior citizen yelled inside his house for help as he fell to the ground and was pistol-whipped repeatedly by the suspect. And as the victim's adult son ran outside to help him, the thief grabbed the victim's phone and ran off. Police identified and located Garland's vehicle using California's anti-crime detection system and arrested him on suspicion of felony robbery. Several weeks later, he allegedly targeted another Asian American man with hateful behavior at a martial arts gym. According to an Instagram post by the Train for Life gym in Sioux Sun City, Garland threatened to beat down his much smaller victim. At the time, it was the gym's monthly sparring week, and unbeknownst to Garland, the man he was picking on was a professional MMA fighter named Terrence Wrong Turn Saturn. The employees let the two men spar, and Garland didn't even last the entire first round. He called timeout with a minute and a half left on the clock. In a video of the sparring match, the person filming could be heard saying, "You come into my gym, you call out the smallest guy in my gym, and now you want to call a timeout?" The owner then kicked Garland out of the gym and posted the video on social media, using it to emphasize the importance of self-defense training. Number 7. Texas mom teaches her son a lesson. When a mother from Splendora, Texas received reports that her son was bullying other kids in September 2018, she made him wear a t-shirt to school that had "I am a bully" written on both the front and back in large letters. Known only by her first name, Star, the no-nonsense parent posted a photo of the embarrassing ensemble on social media, but it generated a lot of negative feedback from people who thought she was being too harsh on her son, and she ended up deleting the post. Speaking with ABC 13, Star said that she heard that her son was calling his classmates names like stupid and idiots. She unapologetically described herself as an old-school parent, adding that she doesn't coddle her children or sugarcoat the world to them. Star insisted that she wasn't trying to embarrass her son by posting the photo of his "I am a bully" t-shirt online. She claimed her intention was for the post to serve as an apology to the parents of any kids he may have bullied. Despite the disapproving feedback the post received and her decision to delete it, the old-school mom shamelessly stood by her disciplinary decision. She said that her son learned the intended lesson from his punishment when he said that he didn't like how he felt wearing the shirt and that he didn't want anyone else to feel like he did. Child psychologist Dr. Richard Pesikoff told ABC 13 that he understood why a parent would be upset with their child for bullying, but that the t-shirt could do more harm than good. He recommended that Star speak with her son's school counselor for advice on how to handle these situations, but Star said that she'd already had that conversation and that the counselor supported her decision. Number 6. Eric Ronald Baldwin. Between late 2015 and late 2016, at least 4 female college athletes in Colorado endured a relentless campaign of torment at the hands of a married man from Rochester, Minnesota, named Eric Ronald Baldwin. During that same period, authorities believe the former Rochester, Minnesota resident may have targeted as many as 50 victims across the United States. Baldwin superimposed the women's faces on photos of naked bodies and posted them on adult websites along with the victims' names, personal information, and clothed photos from their social media profiles. He also allegedly emailed the material to the victims' professors, family members, and fellow sports team members. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, Baldwin's goal was to make it look like the women were promiscuous and involved in creating adult content. He threatened his targets with extreme violence and death while using a device to keep his IP address anonymous, describing in disturbing detail what he planned to do to the recipient. In one message, Baldwin told a woman that he wanted to bash her head into the floor until her teeth fell out. And another email urged the victim to go along with his demands because he planned on forcing her into submission if she resisted or refused. Baldwin also threatened to hunt his victims by learning their habits and routines. Following his federal arrest for stalking and making interstate threats in 2017, Baldwin reportedly told an FBI agent that he has performance issues in the bedroom that cause him to lash out at women. He also allegedly admitted that he acted with the intention of making the victims fear for their lives. Baldwin pleaded guilty to stalking and making interstate threats without a plea agreement in place. He was sentenced to over 14 years in federal prison and is slated to be released in 2029. The true number of Baldwin's victims may never be known. In 2022, he admitted to stalking a fifth victim in Boston, Massachusetts, and as a result, he was ordered to concurrently serve a 2-year sentence along with his current term. Number 5. Chinarong Marian. After a night out partying in Bangkok in early 2022, 25-year-old Paraploy Saia stopped at a street restaurant for something to eat. A man later identified as 35-year-old Chinarong Marian approached her and tried to clink glasses before asking for Paraploy's phone number. The young woman rejected Chinarong's advances, and he didn't take it too well. Video of the encounter showed Chinarong walking back over to Paraploy's table and pouring a pint of beer all over her. He was apparently unaware that Paraploy was a Muay Thai champion with dozens of national awards under her belt. And in response to Chinarong's rude gesture, she stood up out of her seat and challenged him to a fight. Chinarong quickly realized his mistake and fled the restaurant, but Paraploy caught up with him and continued to give him a well-deserved dose of karma. She verbally berated Chinarong and swiftly delivered a series of kicks to the body. Paraploy also managed to get a right hook in before her friends pulled her off the regretful creep who shamefully walked away from the situation. Chinarong apologized for his actions, but his employer refused to overlook the incident. He was reportedly fired from his job, and both he and Paraploy were fined 500 baht for their behavior. Number 4. Ryan Chinsky. 21-year-old Amelia Holden was working as a waitress in Savannah, Georgia in 2018 when a man later identified as 31-year-old Ryan Chinsky walked by and grabbed her backside. Footage of the encounter showed Holden putting Chinsky into a headlock, slamming him against the wall and throwing him to the ground. One of Holden's co-workers called the police, and Chinsky was arrested the next day on suspicion of battery. News sources later revealed that the father of 2 from Palm Bay, Florida, was at the restaurant with his girlfriend of 11 years, Erica Martin. Holden told Inside Edition that she couldn't repeat most of the things she said to Chinsky as she was seen scolding him on camera, but that she had no regrets about taking action against the accused groper. Speaking with People magazine, she said that she reacted instinctively after initially thinking her friend had grabbed her as a joke. When the groper's hand traveled too far, she realized it wasn't a joke and that she'd been accosted by a stranger. Holden claimed that Chinsky tried telling police that he was innocently trying to move the waitress out of the way as he walked past, but the surveillance video spoke for itself. The footage went viral, and Holden used her newfound internet fame to spread the message that women have a right to defend themselves when someone invades their personal space. She also used the media attention she received as an opportunity to give back to the community by raising more than $18,000 for local cat shelters. Number 3. Michael Arnold. 42-year-old Cassandra Willis unfortunately learned the hard way that it's very difficult to have a stalker properly held accountable for their actions in the US, and more particularly in New York State. She told the Vermont-based Bennington Banner that she met her alleged stalker, 65-year-old Michael Arnold, in 2019 when he became a regular customer at her restaurant in Schuylerville. Soon enough, she began receiving harassing and threatening emails containing inappropriate photos of a man who appeared to be Arnold, along with aerial images of her house. In 2020, Willis received a package containing a threatening letter, along with photos and addresses of her loved ones, and a warning that karma would soon be delivered. Arnold was charged with harassment, but the case was dismissed in exchange for his agreement to stay out of trouble, and Willis was given an order of protection. A social media account believed to belong to Arnold continued posting slanderous and intimidating content about Willis, but the district attorney hesitated to pursue additional charges for what he called a gray area when it comes to determining whether the posts violated the protective order. Willis said that when the restraining order expired, Arnold's stalking escalated to taking photos of her while sitting outside her business and home. He also allegedly began flying his plane in circles over her house at all hours of the day. In 2023, Arnold was charged with stalking. He was released on bail with orders to have no contact with Willis, and he was banned from flying. But the prohibited contact and the incessant flyovers continued, according to the victim. A few months later, Vermont authorities charged Arnold with 2 felonies and 3 misdemeanors, including aggravated stalking with court order violation, violation of an abuse prevention order, and giving false information to the police. And less than a day later, he was charged in New York with 9 new counts, including felony aggravated contempt of court. But he's currently out on bail while awaiting his next court date. Willis is understandably aggravated, exhausted, and at her wits' end with the situation. She said she lives in constant fear that something bad will happen to her and that justice won't be served. Speaking to the Bennington Banner, Arnold chalked the situation up to a misunderstanding and called Willis crazy. He's scheduled to return to court in New York in December 2023. Number 2. Chrissy Teigen. American swimsuit model, wife to singer John Legend, cookbook author and TV personality Chrissy Teigen has long been known for her unapologetic social media posts. But while she branded her behavior as an admirable form of blunt honesty, many felt that her attitude was excessively snarky, conceited, and in some cases downright mean. Teigen's in-your-face persona came back to haunt her in 2021 when model and reality show star Courtney Stodden called her out for cyberbullying. Stodden claimed that Teigen began tormenting her relentlessly in 2011 after she infamously married a 50-year-old acting coach when she was still a teenager. While many people mocked and ridiculed Stodden, the now 29-year-old accused Teigen of being particularly cruel in a series of tweets and direct messages, which included statements encouraging Stodden to self-harm. In an Instagram video posted in 2021, Stodden admonished Teigen for being not only mean, but vicious at a time when the troubled young woman needed help, if anything. The allegations went viral, and a backlash against Teigen was massive. Her cookware line was promptly pulled from shelves at Macy's stores and removed from the company's website, and she lost a partnership deal with Bloomingdale's. Teigen apologized for her past behavior in a lengthy Twitter thread, describing herself as an insecure, attention-seeking troll. She admitted feeling embarrassed and asked for an opportunity to own up to her past mistakes and seek self-improvement and change. Stodden accepted Teigen's apology, but she doubted the Bullies' sincerity, speculating that the remorseful words were mainly an attempt to mitigate the damage to Teigen's career. In the wake of the controversy, several others came forward with cyberbullying allegations against Teigen, including fashion designer Michael Costello and former Teen Mom star Farrah Abraham. The scandal has since died down in the media, and while Teigen remains active on social media, she appears to be taking a less catty tone with her words. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. Number 1. Moraza Ahmed. After his girlfriend broke up with him in 2022, 32-year-old Moraza Ahmed refused to accept that the relationship was over. When pleading with the woman to take him back didn't work, Ahmed tried bullying his ex into keeping him in her life. The aggressive behavior only worsened as Ahmed repeatedly showed up uninvited at his ex's house in Oxford, England. During one of these unwanted visits, the disgruntled ex-boyfriend chased after the victim, grabbed her and pulled her hair in an attempt to stop her from leaving as she tried getting into her car. The woman managed to fight Ahmed off and drove to her mom's house. But when she returned home later on, she found the property ransacked with her underwear torn to shreds and ripped pages of the Kama Sutra lying around. There was also a series of notes about what the woman had been up to recently and who she was spending her time with, making it clear that Ahmed was keeping close tabs on her. Prosecutor Nick Mather said that the materials found inside the woman's home were meant to humiliate her and possibly make her feel too embarrassed to report Ahmed's crimes to the police. But she did go to the police, and Ahmed ultimately pleaded guilty to burglary, causing actual bodily harm, stalking, and criminal damage. He apologized in court, blaming his behavior on alcohol and vowing to change his ways, but was still sentenced to 27 months in prison. Ahmed was also strictly banned from contacting the victim for 8 years.
9. Langang Abdul Rahimzai. When Langang Abdul Rahimzai arrived in Britain, he was evading murder charges in Syria. This somehow went undetected by immigration authorities, who also somehow believed his claim that he was only 14 years old, despite him being closer to 20 at the time. A Serbian court convicted him in absentia of murdering 2 people. In the meantime, he was granted asylum and put into England's foster care system, which placed him with an unsuspecting family looking to provide housing to a child in need. Authorities would later learn that Abdul Rahimzai had a long history of illegally crossing borders. He was originally from Afghanistan and initially moved through Pakistan and Iran. From there, he went on to spend time in Norway, Italy, and Serbia. The same year he arrived in Britain, he made an asylum claim in Norway, but was denied. In 2022, Abdul Rahimzai fatally stabbed 21-year-old Thomas Roberts during an argument outside a Subway restaurant in Bournemouth. Roberts was reportedly trying to act as a mediator during a confrontation between Abdul Rahimzai and another man over an electric scooter. The disagreement lasted just 24 seconds before the suspect plunged a knife into the victim's body. When Abdul Rahimzai was arrested, he told the police he was 16 years old, but they eventually realized he was lying. Abdul Rahimzai admitted to manslaughter in court, but denied murdering Roberts. He claimed that he carried a knife because there were people from Afghanistan living in the area who wanted to harm him. During his trial, his lawyer argued that his client stabbed Roberts out of an instinct to protect himself and that he never meant to kill anyone. Unconvinced by the defense's claims, the jury convicted Abdul Rahimzai of murder. As a result, he was sentenced to life with a minimum of 29 years. 8. Patty and Griff Thomas. Siblings Patty and Griff Thomas were in their early 70s when they were found dead at the farmhouse they shared in Wales in 1976. Their postal carrier noticed they hadn't retrieved some packages he'd left days earlier, so he went inside and encountered a horrific, bloody scene. A medical examiner ruled that Patty died from blunt force trauma and that Griff died from burns, even though he'd sustained a severe head injury. In an odd twist, authorities concluded that Griff killed Patty during a fight over money and then took his own life. They found it highly unlikely that a third party was involved, especially since large amounts of cash were left on the property. Locals were mystified by the tragedy. To them, the circumstances that law enforcement presented just didn't add up. Despite the official opinion of what happened, they became convinced that both siblings were murdered and that the killer is still out there. Patty and Griff had led mostly uneventful lives. Neither of them had ever married, and they spent their entire lives at the farmhouse, where they ran a profitable farm but chose to live modestly. They also didn't go to many places besides their local church, so it was hard to imagine why anyone would want them dead. But it was even more difficult for the community to picture Griff, who was known for his soft and kind demeanor being capable of murder. His age and the fact that he had debilitating arthritis only added to their doubts. Reports of the incident don't mention any of Patty's blood being found on Griff, which would be expected if he'd killed her. For the time being, authorities stand by their ruling on the case, while locals remain adamant that there's more to the story. 7. Russell Corley. 40-year-old Carol Packman mysteriously vanished from her home in Bournemouth, England in 1985, and her body was never found. Shortly after her disappearance, Carol's husband Russell Corley staged his own death by faking a boating accident as part of an insurance scam. Authorities caught him alive and well in 1993, and in 1995 he was imprisoned for fraud. The following year, he was convicted of Carol's murder despite the absence of her body. He was subsequently sentenced to life in prison. Corley appealed his case, but was convicted again in 1998. His conviction was overturned once more in 2003, but his third trial ended in yet another conviction. He eventually confessed to killing his wife, but refused to disclose where her body was and claimed that he burned her remains. Sadly, the parole board was willing to overlook this and ignored the fact that Corley's story changed repeatedly over the years. And in 2020, he was freed after serving 23 years for Carol's murder. He was returned to prison the following year after disappearing from his bail hostel overnight and failing to answer his phone. Corley claimed that he'd left the hostel to take his own life, but changed his mind, and that he was robbed on his way back. To the dismay of the convicted killer's daughter, who campaigned for years to keep him behind bars, the parole board approved Corley's release again in late 2022. A spokesperson said that while the decision may be difficult for Carol's loved ones to accept, Corley will be under supervision and will be returned to prison if he violates the terms of his release. Even if that never happens, hopefully there's at least some comfort in knowing that at 80 years old, he likely doesn't have time to pursue an exceptionally meaningful and fulfilling future. 6. Nathan Maynard Ellis and David Leasley. 42-year-old Julia Rawson was relaxing at a pub in the English town of Dudley in 2019 when a fellow patron named Nathan Maynard Ellis sparked up a conversation with her. He then lured Rawson back to his nearby flat, where he and his boyfriend, David Leasley, decided to reenact some of their favorite horror movie scenes. In what prosecutor Karim Khalil later described as the release of years of pent-up fantasy and desire, the pair brutally murdered Rawson. By the time her body was found, she had been chopped up into 11 pieces, and it was impossible to tell exactly how they killed her. They both refused to talk from day one of the investigation, and they continued to maintain their silence from behind bars. Maynard Ellis is currently serving a life sentence with a minimum of 30 years, and Leasley is serving 19 years to life. From what investigators could gather, Maynard Ellis had an obsession with horror movies and extreme violence, so he was determined to be the mastermind of the crime. And instead of trying to stop him from harming anyone, Leasley unquestioningly went along with his desire to kill. During their sentencing, the judge expressed his frustration with the defendant's refusal to reveal the truth, but it was clear enough that the gruesome act was premeditated, and the killing and dismembering someone had been on their minds for quite some time. 5. Murder on a cannabis farm. One day in 2003, a group of men hid on a remote cannabis farm in Cheshire, England, and waited for 44-year-old father of two Brian Waters to arrive. They ambushed and tortured Waters in front of his adult children, Gavin and Natalie, and they also attacked one of the farm's employees, Suleiman Razak. In the meantime, Waters' wife Julie was abducted from the family's home and was brought to the farm where the horrific scene unfolded. For 3 hours, the attackers tied Waters to a chair, whipped him, burned him, and injured him with a staple gun. They also hung him upside down and assaulted him with an iron bar, while his kids were held at gunpoint and were forced to watch. Waters died from his injuries, and the killers eventually fled the scene. Suleiman Razak, however, survived the ordeal with serious injuries. Investigators determined that the murder was committed over a drug debt Waters owed to a local dealer named John Wilson, who masterminded the whole operation. Wilson and two accomplices, James Raven and Otis Matthews, were convicted and sentenced to life in prison. But one suspect, Christopher Guest Moore Jr., went on the run and remained missing for 16 years. He was finally captured though in 2019 in Malta, where he was living under the alias Andrew Lamb and was working as a yacht captain. Moore was brought back to Britain in 2020 after losing his fight against extradition. In the end, the court found him guilty and sentenced him to life with a minimum of 24 years. 4. Claudia Lawrence. When Claudia Lawrence failed to show up for her shift at the University of York one morning in 2009, the people in her life immediately knew something was wrong. She was last seen leaving the university where she worked as a chef the previous afternoon, and her last known conversation was on the phone with her parents later that day. Claudia's family entered her home and found evidence that she had eaten breakfast and had left for work the day she disappeared, suggesting that something went wrong during the 2-mile walk to her workplace. But there were no outward clues indicating what might have happened to her. A missing persons report was filed, but the police were slow to act on it after determining that Claudia wasn't considered vulnerable. They initially believed that she'd vanished voluntarily and that she would eventually reappear. But as the weeks dragged on, investigators began to treat the case as a suspected homicide. They ruled out the likelihood that she orchestrated her own disappearance, suffered a medical emergency, or encountered a known serial killer. Detectives then concluded that foul play must have been involved in Claudia's disappearance. She'd reportedly been in several casual relationships with men she met at neighborhood bars near her home in York, some of whom were married. Claudia was secretive about her personal life, and some of the people who were questioned weren't very cooperative, making it even more difficult to try getting to the bottom of what happened. Unfortunately, more than 14 years later, Claudia remains missing. 3. Ross McCullum. While working as a human resources advisor in Leicestershire, England in 2021, 23-year-old Megan Newborough began dating her colleague, lab technician Ross McCullum. 6 weeks later, she failed to return home after visiting his parents' house, and her family reported her missing. Police tracked the young woman's phone to McCullum, who admitted during questioning that he'd killed Newborough. He confessed to strangling her in what he described as a blind rage. He also admitted to dumping her body in some bushes and abandoning her car. In the hours after the murder, McCullum sent several lovey-dovey text messages and voicemails to Newborough's phone in an attempt to make himself look innocent. He disclosed the location of her remains to investigators, and it was immediately clear that she had suffered an extremely violent death. In addition to being strangled, she had been cut at least 14 times. In court, his lawyer blamed McCullum's homicidal outburst on undiagnosed post-traumatic stress disorder stemming from childhood abuse. The defendant admitted to manslaughter but denied killing Newborough. However, the jury saw the man's painful past as no excuse for what he did, and they convicted him of murder. In the end, he was sentenced to life with a minimum of 23 years. 2. Nicola Bully. After dropping her 2 kids off at school one morning in early 2023, 45-year-old Nicola Bully took her dog for a walk near her home in Lancashire, England. Unfortunately, she never returned, and very few traces of her have ever been found. Bully's phone was found on a bench where she was participating in a work-related conference call when she vanished. Her dog was found wandering alone about an hour later. Police have been hesitant to believe that foul play was involved. While they were reluctant to speculate on the exact circumstances of her disappearance, a spokesperson for the agency said that the fact that Bully's phone was found on a bench didn't necessarily arouse their suspicions. Her family, on the other hand, has started to fear the worst. Speaking to Sky News, Bully's sister, Louise Cunningham, said somebody must know something. People don't just vanish into thin air. In the meantime, a large search effort ensued. Dozens of volunteers combed the area on foot, along with the help of drones, divers, and search dogs. But no traces of the missing mum have turned up besides her phone and dog. Detectives stand by their claim that there's no reason to believe that any third parties were involved in Bully's disappearance. According to the most recent updates, authorities are working on the case based on the assumption that Bully fell into the river and drowned. In an announcement to the public, they noted that it could be distressing to the missing woman's children and family to assume that something worse might have happened, although they're clearly already distraught by the lack of answers. Investigators also said that based on their surveillance footage analysis, it was highly unlikely that Bully left the area. Sadly, until more evidence is found, the disappearance of Nicola Bully remains a mystery. 1. Ellie Wayne. 18-year-old Kieran Brown died in June of 2020 after being stabbed in the chest by his girlfriend, Ellie Wayne. The incident happened while the couple wrestled on the ground during a drug and booze-fueled fight outside their home in Coventry, England. Kieran's father rushed him to the hospital, where he later succumbed to his injuries. During police questioning, Ellie Wayne claimed she loved her slain boyfriend like no other and that she acted in self-defense. She also said that she carried the knife she used in the stabbing for personal protection. According to a witness, she threatened to stab anyone who came near her. Throughout the trial, the jury heard that Wayne and the victim had a volatile on and off relationship. In the opinion of Detective Inspector Adam Jobson, the crime exemplified the dangers that come along with carrying knives, which enabled the defendant to make a split-second decision that took a life and ruined her own. Had she not been armed, according to Jobson, she wouldn't have been able to inflict such fatal damage. Wayne was convicted of Kieran's murder and was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 17 years.
Would you rather publicly admit to the meanest thing you've ever said or the most illegal crime you've ever committed? Let us know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.